Hello, I'm Anna Amelia from North East Animal Rights. Today we are talking about protecting our wildlife. We're in Newcastle again today from 11:01, so come along and see us and say hello. We'd be delighted to talk to you. Now, we normally concentrate on farmed animals and sea animals, and we tend to forget how important our wildlife is to biodiversity. Biodiversity is the richness and the variety of life on Earth, so that's plants and animals. First of all, we're going to be looking at international animals, the animals like gorillas, leopards and rhinos and that sort of animal. And then we'll obviously come down to the ones which we find in our areas, the local environment. But what is like wildlife, first of all? So it's all the animals we don't class as livestock. So all of those animals which don't get farmed for the table, for food, or our companion animals. There's 100. If we imagine there's 100% of beings on Earth, then 34% are humans, and 60% are livestock, but only 6% are wildlife. Okay. We have masses of information out there. If you Google sort of extinction rates or animal species, there's a huge variety in terms of data. But I'm using the information from the International Union for Conservation of Nature because it's their job, first of all, to make sure all this data is accurate and up to date. But they have lots and lots of information as well. Now, there are 8.7 million plant and animal species on the Earth, okay? 8.7 million plant and animal species. But of that 8.7 million, there's under 2 million are animals. The International Union for Conservation of Nature, they have a red list. So this is all the animals and plants which they deem are on the brink of extinction. They have 105,000 plants and animals on the red list at the moment, okay? So it's 105,000 plants and animals on the red list, and of those, 37,400 are on the brink of extinction. Okay, so that's a good third. That's a third of that straight away. Of those figures, 41% are amphibians, 26% are mammals, 14% are birds, 36% are sharks and rays, and 28% crustaceans. Reef corals are 33%. And 34% conifers. Okay, so we've talked in the past about when we did the fish feel pain, and we talked about the sea and everything, and the sharks getting killed. This is why sharks are 36% of sharks are on the endangered red list. Okay, and overall 37,400 species of animals. Okay. Now let's look more at local wildlife. Okay, so we have spiders, we have flies, we have centipedes, we have the birds, we have caterpillars and all sorts of different things. They all have their part to play in biodiversity and enriching our environment. For example, spiders keep the smaller flies in check. Birds and centipedes eat spiders and flies, caterpillars eat ants, and ants keep the soil aerated as well. Worms keep the soil aerated. We know how important it is to have good air and rich soil so plants can grow in it. Birds eat the worms. Small birds are eaten by bigger birds. Mice eat grubs and carrion, which is obviously dead animals. Mice get eaten by birds, particularly by barn owls, like owls. Moles are eaten by foxes and larger birds. But all of these animals, these small animals in our wildlife, play their part in keeping our environment the way it should be. We as a group have a number of campaigns in our area, local campaigns, but obviously, they could be replicated in other areas as well. We have, first of all, we have a weed killer campaign. This is because our local council uses weed killers, which will also kill bees and insects as well. And obviously we think that's a very bad thing to happen. We know that bees and insects are very, very important. Bees, moths and butterflies, particularly important for pollination for starters. So we are working with the council, and we have an area in our local estate, which is a trial area, so they don't spray weed killers at all. We go around pulling the weeds up by hand. It's a very, very hard job to do, particularly when the sun's melting down or it's when it's really, really cold. But we do it nonetheless because we don't want them to come around with chemicals and spray the chemicals around. We also have a seagull and seabirds campaign because one of our members noticed that there was a lot of seagulls getting shot in specific areas of the town. And seagulls are, well, herringulls. There's no such thing as a seagull, they're actually herringulls, but people refer to them colloquially as seagulls. But they were getting shot, and they are protected. They are on the red list, and they have had massive declines in numbers over the last few decades, 50% decline in numbers. So they're on the red list, and people are going around shooting them, thinking they're, doing it for sport, or doing it for fun, or doing it because they think they're, flying rats. We've heard them called vermin, pests, the noisy neighbours. But actually, we are in their environment, not the other way around. We're also trying to extend our campaign now to netting as well on businesses, because a lot of businesses have netting on because they don't want the birds to obviously go there and defecate and urinate on their properties. But what they don't do is they don't maintain the netting, so the birds get stuck, and invariably, they get injured or they die in them. And in groups like us and another group which we volunteer for get called out to spend a lot of time rescuing these animals when there's absolutely no need for it. So that's the next part of our campaign, to try and talk to businesses as well. We've just done a successful leafleting campaign around the areas where the seagulls are getting shot as well, to try and get information and to make sure that people are aware that these birds are protected. Okay, another one we do is litter picking. You'll have seen obviously the litter picking post we put on, and that's again, it's to try and protect the smaller animals. We have cigarette butts and masks getting dumped and all sorts of litter, and obviously animals are thinking it's food and they will eat it. We also end up with mice instead of bottles, and they can't get out of it because they see something which they think is food instead of a bottle, and they get totally stuck. We've also had a horrendous case of a fox getting its head stuck in a bottle which had been cut in half, and it couldn't get out, and it eventually died. It was horrendous. So these are all the sorts of things that we do locally as well to try and protect our local wildlife. The Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981, the main provisions of this legislation are the protection of vulnerable species, protection of all wild birds. There's no exception to that, it's all wild birds, and the restrictions on selling or keeping wild birds and protecting specific areas. For example, we know that bats are protected, but what about other animals? They all have provision in this legislation for protection, albeit in different degrees. Okay. Now, another piece of legislation, the Hunting Act 2004. I mean, this was a very hard fought for, massively campaigned piece of legislation which was brought in 2004. It makes it illegal to hunt wild mammals with dogs. Not the shooting part of it, mind, the hunting part of it. So the hunting with wild mammals. Sorry, the hunting with dogs. So it's illegal now to hunt on a horse using dogs to get the animals. Okay. And but what happens is obviously we have all of these supposed accidents. We have this trail hunting which goes on. We know it's an absolute myth, and we know that foxes are getting killed. If foxes weren't getting killed and animals weren't getting killed in this trail hunting, we wouldn't need to have groups like Northumberland Hunt Watch or North East Hunt Monitors, who do a fantastic job. They're out there in all sorts of weather with all sorts of abuse and things going on. So we need to make sure that any information we get about hunts is reported to them. Okay, but obviously, if you're not in this area, there are local hunt watch groups in your area as well. Now, although I mentioned that it's illegal to hunt animals with dogs, unfortunately, the shooting part of it isn't illegal. Okay, so if you're a landowner or you have the landowner's permission and you have an animal which you deem is causing a pest or a nuisance to you, you're perfectly entitled to shoot it. You're not allowed to cause suffering to it, of course. So you can't sort of injure it and leave it there to die. You are allowed to kill it. But you know what, I would say there's something, if you're doing something wrong, if you're getting all these animals in an area, you need your fencing sorted out, you need to, there's something going on in your area which is attracting these animals into your land. There's other things we do as well, which are some of them are legal, some of them are illegal, but they're still going nevertheless. There's a pastime, a hobby, twisted, perverted hobby called lamping, which is the use of high-powered lights to get animals flushed out. And then obviously, again, like I said, they're getting the dogs to hunt them and kill them is illegal, but it's perfectly legal to shoot them. And this tends to happen with rabbits. We have in our area around the cliff tops, we have an area which lampers do try to use, and obviously we try to stop as well. There's also hare coursing, which was a sport. It's still a sport in Northern Ireland. It still hasn't been outlawed, which is again chasing hares to try and kill them. And we have ratting, and exactly the same again. It's just these sick, perverted people who have no pleasure in their life, but a harm, living sentient beings, just for the sheer hell of it. Vinnie Jones was somebody who we outed quite a while ago when he was actually going to be the face of Oatly plant milk, saying how much he loves plant milk, but actually in some of his social media he was shown as being quite proud that he had killed all these rabbits and foxes and all sorts of animals, lining them all up and having his photograph taken with a shotgun, absolutely ridiculous. Poor excuse of a man, no man or woman or any gender needs to be doing that to prove how good they are. Okay, Then you have all the nonsense about the badger cull. The badger cull, we know from science, all the scientific evidence out there is, you know, the vast majority of badgers which have been killed, none of them have bovine TB, okay? Science is telling us that. Yeah, we have the National Farmers Union, the NFU, who are very, very powerful, have some very, very wealthy landowners, and who the government listens to, telling them that badgers need to be culled. This is our indigenous species, by the way, as well. These are native to this island, and we are killing them. They were protected, but now because of the NFU and wealthy landowners talking to them and the government, they are now getting culled. We hope that the badger cull is going to be stopped. I mean, we know it is getting phased out, but the reality is all these thousands and thousands of badgers have died absolutely needlessly. We also have game shooting as well. So the Glorious 12th coming up very shortly in August the 12th. Is supposed to be a glorious day for grouse shooting. So we have all these baby grouse, which are, you know, hatched, put into mesh cages, and they live in an absolutely awful environment. And as soon as they are able to fly on the Glorious 12th, they're bred particularly for this season. They are released, you know, thrown into the air, and people who pay thousands and thousands of pounds are invited to go to these big shooting parties, who have got no better ways to entertain themselves or shooting feather targets, you know, just for a little bit of fun. And again, we have you know, people like Chris Packham. Chris Packham is a big campaign against raptor persecution. So this is all the birds, you know, obviously if somebody's rearing birds to be shot in a particular area, and we have raptors going and taking these birds out as they would normally. That is what they actually do. You know, that's part of their you know, how they survive. Well, obviously landowners don't like raptors being there, so they will shoot them, they will poison them, okay? And again, this is somebody messing with biodiversity, putting loads of animals in an area which they're not supposed to be. And then raptors obviously go in there, raptors will breed, and they will cause problems as well. And then we have awful things like, you know, we have people who have, if you have like you know, like mice in your house or rats in your house, or flies, or any sort of like infestation, basically animals where you don't want them to, they wouldn't normally expect them to be in a household. You have people having all these awful things to try and get rid of them. You know, the lethal traps, the lethal mouse traps, you know, glue traps, which are just absolutely horrendous. And we have seen cases, many, many cases of animals who were caught in glue traps, including cats as well, domestic animals as well. So these animals you purported to love, and these animals are getting caught in these awful glue traps, and animals will chew their legs because they're so desperate to get away, and that, you know, it's just an awful thing to do to a living breathing animal. What can we do to help? So first of all, the obvious thing is don't litter your environment, you know, chewing gum, cigarette ends, you know, the plastic in cigarettes and things, masks. If you're going to wear masks, try, you know, please use the recyclable ones, you know, the reusable ones. Don't buy the disposable ones. If you have to use disposable ones for work, make sure when you dispose of them, you dispose of them safely. Make sure you cut the elastic band off the end so animals can't get trapped in them. Think about all the chemicals you're pouring down your drains, you know, all the washing up liquids, all the bleaches and things like that, because they are damaging the waterways and all the fish and the wildlife in there as well. Think about your plastic usage, you know, try and reuse things, try not to use single-use plastic as well. Don't walk by if you see an injured animal. You know, if you see an injured animal which needs help, you know, contact someone. There's plenty groups who can help you locally. And if you're in, you know, if you're in total doubt, you literally don't know who to ask, contact us, because we have lots of contacts. Plant bee and insect attracting flowers as well. You know, there's lots of companies now, you know, places like Wilkinson's actually have on the advert, on the packets now, that these will attract plants. Sorry, they will grow plants which attract bees and insects. Bees, moths, butterflies, they're all attracted by certain flowers, and they are massively beneficial to the environment because they're really good pollinators. Put insect hotels up as well. Again, that encourages insect life, ladybirds and all sorts of different things to your gardens. Don't take part in shoots, which is pretty obvious. But if you are aware of any shoots or hunts taking place, you know, under the guise of trail hunts, please make sure you contact your local hunt watch group, Northumberland Hunt Watch Group, or North East Hunt Monitors, or any of the SAV groups. They will be more than happy to get that information off you, so they can monitor what is going on. There's also people who can help with animals, which some people would call them pests or vermin. We call them wildlife. But you know, there's no need to use lethal force with any of these animals. The company is called Humane Wildlife Solutions, so please use them as well. They're absolutely fantastic. They have lots and lots of knowledge and getting and moving all sorts of animals, from tiny little insects to, to bigger animals as well. But also watch out for petitions, watch out on social media, share things, let people know that you care about our wildlife. And if you see something which is causing a problem, like chemical usage in a particular area, please make sure that somebody knows about it and that you're happy with it. This has all been about protecting our local wildlife and how important they are to us. We need them far more than they need us. If we are not here, they will survive, they will thrive and they will flourish, but we cannot survive without them. So please take the time to be aware of what is around your local wildlife and look after them. Okay. So thank you very much for listening. That's all from me for now. This is Anna Malia from North East Animal Rights, signing off and saying thank you. Bye for now.